Welcome to the podcast, Demetrius. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can't complain, not even a little bit.
Well, that's good to hear. I always like to start off the episodes. If you could tell the audience, tell me a little bit about your background, where have you been professionally and, kind of what brought you to the point of starting Captain?
Well, my entire career has been basically in finance. I got an accounting degree from the University of Louisville and ended up as a cost accountant and controller in the construction space. And really more specifically in construction companies that did insurance related work. So insurance repairs after major natural disasters. And so that's kind of how I got embedded and entrenched in this like crazy world of finance and insurance claims.
Now, have you always wanted to eventually start your own venture, or through your work in this space, you kind of see, wow, there's a gap here. No, someone's not filling the gap. I think me, my co-founders, we can potentially fill the gap. Or did you eventually say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur one day? Maybe not today, but eventually.
Well, I got the bug, naturally from my grandfather and father who were in the oil and gas business. And so my grandfather had a number of patents in the fracking space. And so, um, you know, doing, and thinking through ideas was natural to me. I've
Mhm.
been trained by some of the best. And so there was always this sort of moment that I'd find a thing and see an opportunity and be able to capture it well. And so it just happened that it was in this space of insurance and construction and these sort of legacy businesses where a lot can be automated and a lot can be fixed.
Tell the audience exactly what Captain does, and when answering that, how did you come to the name Captain?
Yeah. So really what Captain does is after a major natural disaster, it takes insurance companies a long time to basically issue payment to you. They might approve it, but it takes them a little while to get the money to you. And so what we do is we advance money to your contractor so that they can get started right away. And so that you can get on with the recovery process. And then we take a fee from that contractor for advancing those funds and then get paid back by the carrier. And so, really, when you think about that, if you ever lost a home or had a claim, you really need a captain,
Yeah.
right? You need somebody to help guide you through this sort of once in a lifetime experience. But unfortunately, that's happening far more often as you think about climate. And we're always seeing these things that are happening: wildfires, hurricanes, you know, tornadoes. And you're really not excluded anywhere you live in the country at this point. And so that's how we got there. And frankly, we're hopefully being a captain to thousands of policyholders and contractors throughout the country at this point.
Now, is there a limit to the type of damages that you guys would lend towards? Like, for instance, if someone's home wasn't covered for catastrophic tornado damage, but was covered for water damage, is there a difference in how you handle that? And is it working with the insurance company, understanding that they would eventually pay a claim, so you lend the money? How does some of the mechanics of it work?
Well, really, the way we think about this is in the context of a third party payer. The insurance company has made a promise of some sort, whether it be for flood, fire, whatever coverage there might be. And that promise is what we're underwriting. Is that a good promise? Has your insurance company been consistent in paying their bills when they have them? And moreover, is it hard to collect from them? And so that's what we're normally looking at when your contractor presents your claim to us. And then from there, what we then say is, okay, is it profitable to this contractor? So sometimes the insurance company's paying, but they're just not paying enough,
Yeah.
right? And so, and especially in a market where there's a lot of inflation, right? Materials are really expensive at the moment, but they're starting to come down. And so those are the sort of things that having a captain and somebody looking into the claim will help see so that you know whether or not you're actually really getting a fair shake in terms of your overall claim, but also making sure that your contractor can even afford to pay the bill, right?
Hmm.
So for materials and labor and fees, so that you can get going straight away. And so, you know, it doesn't really matter what the peril type is, as long as your insurance company has said yes to it, we're there for it.
How big do you estimate this market to be? And was part of the appeal in starting the company and filling this gap was that the you've seen the climate related events increase, to probably an exceptionally high number from 50 years ago, the last 10 years, and you thought, hey, this problem is going to persist probably more than it ever has before. And so that was part of the impetus to say, this is worth the venture that we're going to start.
Well, it really was born out of a mistake that we made at a previous company I founded called Weather Check, where we
Okay.
were doing storm damage prediction notifications for policyholders on behalf of carriers. And what we really ran into is that a lot of policyholders were texting us back saying, "Hey, can you help me now? Yeah, my insurance company paid me money, but I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to choose a contractor. I didn't plan on rebuilding my house."
Yeah.
All these sort of things. And so, that was happening a lot, right? The scale was a little daunting.
Hmm.
And then when we looked across the landscape, we said, well, nobody's funding this. And so that was really the impetus for how we got to, okay, this is a big problem we're solving. When you sort of think about it in terms of dollars, $92 billion worth of insured losses in the US alone, in 2019. And so, and that's just the insured. Let's not even talk about the uninsured,
Yeah.
that are out there. And that's another $200 billion of uninsured risk that's out there. And so there's a big market for helping people through every one of these events.
I mean, from in hearing you talk about it, sounds like, have you had an experience along these lines where you've lost a property or had damage to a property? Because in hearing you talk about it, sounds I can hear the passion in your voice for what you guys are currently filling. The void that you're filling.
Well, thank God I have not had a personal experience, with one of these events, except for the fact that I've been very close to them. So, my hometown of Madisonville, Kentucky, was hit by a tornado in the late '90s. The adjacent town was hit by the Western Kentucky tornadoes just last year, and
Hmm.
so there's been very, very close calls with some of these events. But then, I think about like the effect that Hurricane Katrina had on me, seeing it as a young person,
Yeah.
right? And thinking like, wow, like, and even Sandy, and in your neck of the woods, sort
Yep.
of like, wow, are we really still dealing with these sort of things? Like, we're sending people to Mars, but we can't quite figure out how to recover a town,
Yeah.
you know?
It's crazy.
And it's sort of like, okay, we've got to do better. There's more that we can do. And we think we can bring finance and technology to bear to make it easier.
With all the advances in technology that we've had, it seems this space and the insurance space still is lagging behind. It doesn't feel as if they've either put enough technology into their processes and their systems, and it's still very much all right, we'll take a look at the damage, we'll get back to you in X amount of time. It doesn't seem like there's an impetus for them to change.
Y- You know what it is it's the nature of how insurance works. If you're writing insurance well, you don't have losses or you have
Yeah.
very few of them. And so there really is not the right incentive. The incentives aren't aligned for your insurer to really get really, really good at what happens during a claim scenario. And so that's why we've even said sometimes insurers need a captain, right? Sometimes insurers need somebody to show them, okay, here's how it's successfully done because we've aligned the incentives. For us, because we're lending the money, we basically are saying, hey, we don't want to take any risk either. We want to make sure that it's fully legitimate. We want to make sure that we can support our contractor through the process and support the policyholder. And so what that does is it basically reduces the risk of fraud for the carrier, right? Because we want to get paid back, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of incentive from our world to make the process as seamless as possible. And the other really big thing is here, policyholders have all of these rights. They're the other side of the insurance contract,
Hmm.
right? But they just don't know that they have these rights.
I
And
don't
so,
read my insurance contracts, to be
well,
honest.
who does? Who does, right? And frankly, here's the thing: is that most state law has recognized that already, and they put everything in your favor. And so it's really just a function of you knowing exactly what's available to you and having a guide through that process. And so, Captain is here to sort of be a marketplace, connect folks to the right resources at the right time, and make it go smoothly.
How aware are people of those states, those rights that the state has cemented, and how many people are just aware of the potential help they can get, because most people, as far as I see it, like they see this daunting insurance contract and it's like, I don't think I can do this, or I don't know where to start, and it feels like there's just this huge education gap.
It's enormous, and frankly, some of the challenges that one side benefits more than the other, right? The less you know, the less likely you are to use the coverage, right?
Hmm.
And so it really is about sort of having someone to partner with you in that process and using tools to empower it all the way through. And let's not even talk about the fact that construction is a hard thing,
Yeah.
right? Picking a contractor is a hard thing, right? And so really having some tool that sort of helps validate and authenticate the decisions that you're making starts to really, really matter, up against the daunting nature of the insurance contract and picking a contractor. Basically two impossible things.
What's the biggest lesson that you've learned since you've launched Captain, about, kind of what you're doing, and either your team, what's the biggest lesson thus far?
Well, I think that the I've been a little shocked at how I've seen insurers treat their policyholders. It has been one of those things where, we as consumers really think, okay, I've got this great company that I've been paying my premiums to,
Hmm.
and your insurance isn't really tested until you have a claim. And so you start to see what happens when you actually get into those scenarios. And I've been like a little disappointed, really, with like, okay, like you should be treating your customer better than this. And so, but been really encouraged by the role that we've been able to play in helping move processes along, making policyholders whole faster, making sure that contractors are being paid, because of the tools that we've built.
What's the best piece of advice you've received thus far?
That's a really, really good question. Best piece of advice that I've received thus far. I think the really the best piece of advice probably from a friend and our teammate and captain, and she says, it's better to be what is it, strong and right than strong and wrong. And so much of what you see happen in a lot of these processes, especially in finance and insurances, sometimes it can be really strong and wrong, right? And so we've been highly intentional about going slower, but also making sure that we're right in every single instance, so that we can deliver the highest degree of value in the form of our products back to our contractors and our policyholders.
As someone that knows the space quite well, something you said earlier sticks in my mind, which is, you mentioned the 92 billion for the insured, but the 200 billion for the uninsured. As someone as knowledgeable in the space as you are, what more can be done to help the uninsured? Because to me, it seems there's a huge gap there as well, and not that Captain needs to solve every equation related to this, but you know the space well. Just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, our general view is that it's not just uninsured folks, it's also underinsured. So
Hmm.
one of the things that we've started to see, and we've certainly seen this in the context of a market that we're working aggressively, the Marshall Fire in Boulder County, Colorado, is that we really do need to be looking at our policy coverages um, more often, especially in markets where you're seeing hyper growth and
Hmm.
hyper appreciation. So if your market's selling real estate, like gangbusters, then you need to be looking at your policy typically every 6 months to make sure that those limits are in line, because it's that replacement cost is sometimes nearly double.
Yeah.
And those are the sort of things that would really help us tackle, the underinsured gap and the uninsured gap that's out there.
Tell us a little bit more about those around you in terms of the team. How big is the team? What does the team look like in terms of, types of roles and types of people you have on the team?
Well, we've been incredibly fortunate, first of all, that we've been able to build first in Louisville, Kentucky. Our operations centers here. I spend my time between Louisville and San Francisco. And the team is comprised of underwriters, servicers, folks who are looking at claims and operationalizing much of our work and deploying the capital that we have at our disposal. There's lawyers, compliance team, and then there's obviously a significant product design and engineering team that's sitting here, team of 15 today. And we fully expect to move that to 30 by the end of the year, given just so much volatility throughout the United States. And so, we're really excited to keep adding folks, and really bringing people to bear. Louisville's a great place to call home, in a market where everything's super expensive. And so we've been incredibly fortunate that we've had people move here. Not at our request, but
Hmm.
just because they found the home of bourbon to to be a place. So we're really, really encouraged, and frankly, can't do any of this without a really, really great team of people who aren't just focused on technology or finance, but also are focused on really helping people. There are a lot of companies out there that are great and are doing really cool things, but here at Captain, you actually get to affect a very real thing, which is somebody being put back in their house faster, after they've seemingly lost everything.
Do you think, the success that you've had thus far, and hopefully, that continues, obviously, that at some point it might help to change the way insurance companies either treat or work with homeowners? Because without the pressure of firms like you, insurers have very little reason to change. But if you come in, you begin to fill a gap and the equation starts to be flipped, do you see that as a potentially really beneficial byproduct?
Well, I'll start by saying that there are companies that are already starting,
That's
right?
good
There
to
are
hear.
companies who are already sort of saying, hey, Captain, we understand what you're doing. We know what it looks like, and we know how it can help us get better. And so there are firms like Erie Insurance and Slide and Hippo who are actively engaging so that they can improve for their policyholders. And that's what we're, most interested in having those conversations.
In terms of, where you've seen, or where you've helped the most thus far, is it more the middle of the country, the coasts, north, south? Where has kind of been you've seen the biggest impact to date?
Well, we are funding claims in 20 states today.
Okay.
There, right now, it's been pretty cyclical based on like what's happened, right? So, Houma, Louisiana, following the hurricane that happened there last year, Western Kentucky tornadoes, and the tornado that occurred in December, the Marshall Fire that also occurred in December, in Colorado, and then we have a pretty large presence in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where there's been major hailstorms. And so you sort of think about everything that you see on the 7 o'clock news. I'm sure that in the next 2 to 3 months, Puerto Rico will be a major place that we spend some time and deploy capital. So anywhere where insurance companies are paying is where we are.
Do you guys it sounds, and maybe I'm wrong here. It sounds like, in part, do you follow the weather pretty closely?
Well, yeah,
Like it's the news, and like, hey, there's a storm that's brewing in the Gulf. Antennas go up, and hey, this could be something that we really need to pour resources into.
well, we're absolutely looking at I-98, which is an invest system that's in the Gulf of Mexico at the moment, which looks like it's going to be our strongest storm this season of 2022. The way we think about it is that there's a long tail of damage, right? A lot of times it takes people years. And in the case of Sandy, there's still people who have not rebuilt their homes
Hmm.
that are still trying. And that's, I guess, 6 years later.
10
Um,
years later.
and 10 years later,
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm trying to give them some grace in terms of how long.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah.
lower Ninth Ward, I mean, you sort of think about like what happened there post Katrina, and so we're always working from a very long tail of events that have happened, years and years of worth of events where we're stepping into the equation. And so the problem is that there's more and more events,
Yeah,
right?
unfortunately.
And they're frankly getting more and more severe. And so we're really sort of mindful of each one as they occur, but also understanding that we're going to have to bring considerably more capital to bear up against the opportunity that's before us.
A question that just came to mind. Um, so each state obviously is run by different parties politically and whatnot. And I'm not trying to dovetail us into a political conversation, but there is the way in which different parties look at climate related events. Does that potentially impact how homeowners can rebuild, the options available to them if a state, for example, doesn't recognize that an event is climate related, or they downplay certain aspects of it? Does some of that come into play for certain areas of the country and put them at a disadvantage?
Um, we haven't seen that just
Okay.
yet. I would say that like the general political view for most governors who have a big role to play in disaster recovery efforts is that reelection campaigns are won and lost on how governors respond to
That's
a
true.
disaster in their state. And so, the National Association of Governors, of which we've engaged, have been absolutely wonderful to work with. You've got guys like Andy Bashir here in Kentucky, who've been incredibly responsive and have been really innovators in how they think about the recovery effort and things that like are going to take a long time. I think to your point, though, there are major opportunities for us on the ESG side of things to continue to build. So like, hey, how do we turn, and you notice that I said opportunities. Yes, this is a bad moment, but how do we turn it into something that puts somebody back in a better state,
Yeah.
right? Can we build back with more renewable materials? Can we build back with solar? Can we make homes more efficient? Can we do things differently from something that was, and frankly, the folks of Boulder County are doing that in a really, really wonderful way. Frankly, the best I've seen in my career. And so
Interesting.
those are the ones where I think there's a real big opportunity for us to deploy ESG related capital to these events.
I saw that you guys raised some outside capital. How was investor appetite? How was the investment process? If another founder picked up this episode, what was some of the things that you learned in talking to investors and kind of going through the pitching process that you can tell them that they might learn if they're just about to embark on that?
Well, I'm reminded of Ben Horowitz's hard thing about hard things, which is that at the end of the day, there are certain types of businesses that you have a larger education burden. Captain happens to be one of those where we have to spend a lot of time because people don't think about it, right? They see the headline, hey, this big event happened, but they never really think about, okay, well, what happens in the aftermath?
Mhm.
And so really bringing that to the forefront of investors and sort of saying, hey, this is a really big opportunity. So there's a lot of education. We're fortunate to find great super founders who were already supporting us, like Zuhair Bakor from Keep Safe and Philip Berner, and a bunch of others, frankly, that were really instrumental in the early days of like getting behind us and sort of saying, this is really important. Then it was finding guys like Pete Flint and Hans Tung over at GGV and NFX to really come in and push their weight and muscle around a bit to help the round come together. And we've since added a C plus stage promise feline from Growth Warrior Capital, which is frankly my first Black investor ever. So now having done 2 startups, we've been incredibly thrilled, and I think first female. And so really having a great cadre of investors, Girton Ventures as well out of Austin. And so it's gone well. The debt was interesting. CoVenture led our debt facility. They were incredibly flexible to work with, but it was one of those scenarios about getting comfortable and like, what are we really talking about? What do we think it looks like over the long run? And we
Yep.
continue to work with them to this day.
We have just a few minutes left, and I usually like to end a bit lighter with some fun questions. So first one is, do you have a favorite book in the last book that you read?
Wow. I do not have a favorite book, but I have a book that I'm actively reading right now, which is one of our investors' books, Burn Rate by Andy Dunn. And so I'm really excited to get into like, just, as I've grown as an entrepreneur and founder, the mental health part of this.
Hmm.
I've been praying and meditating for almost 15 years for 2 hours a week,
Wow.
and with a coach. And it's been one of those things that has been really top of mind for me. Now having 2 kids and a wife, and balancing it all, I think it's incredibly important that we do that and spend more time focusing on like, okay, how do we keep it all sane? When you're sort of dealing with the type of events that we're dealing with, like, right,
Yeah.
we're dealing with people's biggest problems, and so how do we keep it all together? I think Burn Rate's got something really good in there for us on the topic.
Well, it sounds like you answered my next question, which is, what do you do to unwind? And it sounds like meditation is the key piece there.
Well, I have learned, and this is from my grandfather, like to never take it on. People say, "Well, are you stressed? Are you?" And I sleep like a baby every night because this corporation should run on its own. It should be its own thing. And so we are intentional about making sure that that's the case. And frankly, being a Midwestern startup, we make money, right? And so um, at the end of the day, what we do is not charity. It's not free.
Yeah.
We get a fee for the utilization of our cash. And so that's how we're moving forward. And I'm taking up a few like golf lessons and stuff like that, trying to get better. But you can call me Tiger Weeds at this point because I'm terrible.
Uh, do do you have a favorite sport or sports teams that you root for? Is it Louisville basketball?
It's not Louisville basketball, unfortunately. I go to a lot of Louisville games, Louisville alum, but I've become a really big Raiders fan. And
Interesting.
so which I think is maybe a little bandwagon, but and then I keep hearing about pickleball, so I might have to
So
play,
funny. I've heard more and more about pickleball recently too. It's very strange.
Yeah, so that's about it.
Favorite vacation spot?
Oh wow. I don't get to take many vacations. So the folks at our PR firm were nice enough to let us use a place that they have in Hawaii, which was wonderful and delightful. And frankly, one of the first vacations I had taken in probably 10 years. And so, I don't know. I'm not really a big vacation guy.
And then final question, biggest inspiration in life?
Wow. Other business leaders are really, really inspiring to me. I think about, and there's not just one. I, I'm a mama's boy, and so Black women are probably one of the biggest inspirations to me. Like, so if I was rattling off in my head, like Melody Hobson from Ariel Investments, now a new owner of the Denver Broncos,
Hmm.
um, Oprah Winfrey, my mama, like those people are sort of the ones in my head that are like Dana Cosby, who's our general counsel here. Um, just their ability to move the needle is so impressive. Promise feeling. Like, it's just like these folks are just, in spite of adversity, just machines, and and but also people. And
Yep.
so um, the Black women are kind of killing it in the game for me.
Well, Demetrius, I appreciate you taking a few minutes and coming on the show. If someone on the show wanted to reach out either to you or to Captain, how can they do that? How can they find you guys?
Yeah, captainhq.com is where you can find us, and reach out. You know, a contractor who you think needs a little bit of cash liquidity or is in the insurance business, or you've got a claim. We're always happy to talk to policyholders and maybe match you with a contractor who's already approved by us.
Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, Demetrius. I appreciate the few minutes. Continued success to you and the team.
Thank you so much, sir.